anywhere in the United States. That intercontinental ballistic missile reached a record altitude, 10 times higher than the International Space Station, and it landed close to Japan as well. President Trump responding to the provocation, saying, quote, "We'll take care of it," end quote. Also tonight, President Trump winning a critically important legal battle against the subversive left and deep state. Federal Judge Timothy Kelly ruling against an Obama leftover who actually sued the Trump administration, alleging that President Trump didn't have the authority to choose the head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. The judge refused to block the president's appointment of OMB Director Mick Mulvaney to also be acting director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. We'll have the full report tonight on the depths to which the Dems and the Obama leftovers have descended, trying futilely to obstruct President Trump's policies and his administration. And the Democrats have absolutely no shame in their efforts to obstruct. Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi actually pulling out of a meeting with President Trump at the White House with just a week and a half to go before a possible government shutdown. We'll take up all of that here tonight. Our top story, North Korea resuming its provocations after a 10-week pause. The rogue regime today launched a ballistic missile that traveled 2,800 miles into space before then crashing into the Sea of Japan. The launch coming just over a week after President Trump relabeled North Korea a state sponsor of terrorism. Fox News national security correspondent Jennifer Griffin with our report.
It's the third time North Korea has ever fired an intercontinental ballistic missile. The ICBM flew 2,800 miles into space for a total of 50 minutes. That's more than 10 times higher than the orbit of NASA's space station.
It went higher, frankly, than any previous shot they've taken.
It splashed down in the waters off Japan within 280 miles of shore.
Today at 3:18 a.m., a ballistic missile was launched from North Korea's western coast and has landed in our exclusive economic zone.
The launch time unusual. Normally, North Korea launches at dawn or during daylight hours. The latest provocation comes more than a week after President Trump put North Korea back on the state sponsor of terrorism list, and after Trump warned North Korea, "Do not try us," in a speech in South Korea earlier this month. South Korea responded to today's test with a precision strike of its own, firing a short-range missile with a clear message for Pyongyang. This occurred 6 minutes after North Korea's launch. This is the 16th ballistic missile test for North Korea this year. With each test, experts say North Korea is getting closer to perfecting the re-entry of a potential nuclear warhead into the Earth's atmosphere, capable of one day striking the United States.
It's likely that the envoy from China, who just visited recently, was trying to negotiate with them, that has not succeeded.
Earlier today, the South Korean unification minister warned that North Korea's nuclear program is advancing more quickly than many thought. Quote, "We cannot rule out the possibility Pyongyang may declare the completion of their nuclear program in a year."
Missile experts tell us North Korea can now launch a missile over 7,500 miles on a flattened trajectory, putting every city in the United States now in range if the warhead survives re-entry. At the Pentagon, Jennifer Griffin, Fox News.
And President Trump's comments on North Korea coming during the meeting with Speaker Ryan and Senate Majority Leader McConnell. There he also ripped into Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer for their refusal to attend the meeting. The Dems' no-show comes as Congress now faces a deadline to avoid a government shutdown. Fox News Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel has our report.
I'm going to have to run down to the White House for a meeting that I gather Senator Schumer and Leader Pelosi are not coming to.
The government's due to run out of money next Friday, December 8th, and yet Democrat leaders Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi backed out of a scheduled White House meeting with President Trump, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, and Speaker Paul Ryan. Schumer said after a tweet from President Trump saying he doesn't see a deal on the end-of-the-year issues, they want to cut him out of the fiscal talks.
As long as he remains a destructive force, it would be a waste of everyone's time to continue working with someone who clearly has no interest in coming to an agreement. We hope the president, in order to avoid this calamity, will change his mind.
The Senate Majority Leader notes he never backed out of a meeting when President Obama was in the White House. And the Senate Republican whip suggested the Democratic leaders want a government shutdown.
I can't imagine why the Democratic leader and Ms. Pelosi decided to simply not do their job. What they need to do is step up and say yes to doing their job and keeping the government up and running.
Democrats have tried to flex their muscles, noting that their votes are typically needed on issues such as spending and debt. They're definitely needed in the Senate, where most major pieces of legislation require 60 votes, and there are only 52 Republicans. And Schumer has rattled off a laundry list of items he wants included in a spending bill, such as cost-sharing reductions for Obamacare, more hurricane relief money, and a debt ceiling increase. Other Democrats have pushed for addressing the status of children brought to this country illegally by their parents.
Oh, you don't have 218 votes to pass a budget, and you need our help? Well, you know that we are ready, willing to keep the government open.
Schumer and Pelosi asked their GOP counterparts, McConnell and Ryan, for a late afternoon meeting. GOP leadership sources say the meeting was at the White House. They skipped it, so no side meeting. Lou?
Mike, thank you very much. Mike Emanuel, as Pelosi and Schumer and Guterres, well, they're flying some rather odd colors these days. Now to the other major story in Washington. The battle over the rightful lawful director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Federal Judge Timothy Kelly putting a quick end to the left's efforts to take over the agency. The judge rejected a lawsuit from an Obamaite and deep stater who claimed she was the rightful head, at least acting head, of the CFPB. The judge said no. Fox News Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen with our report.
President Trump's acting director for the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, Mick Mulvaney, began the morning projecting casual confidence in his leadership of the agency, later blasting out a photo of himself digging into the details, as he put it on Twitter, all without mentioning the mounting challenge to his authority.
Hey, ho, ho. Mick Mulvaney has got to go.
CFPB's Deputy Director Leandra English installed in that post last week as one of the final acts of ex-director Richard Cordray before his resignation, sued the president and Mulvaney in federal court, seeking an emergency order to bar Mulvaney from exercising authority on the grounds that the 2010 law that established CFPB makes her the acting director. And an attorney for English tweeted out her statement, "I plan on spending the day at CFPB headquarters taking calls and meetings with external stakeholders and bureau staff."
This agency has fought for working people, and now it is time for us to fight for the agency.
In court papers late Monday, Justice Department attorneys backing the president sought to quash the English suit on the grounds that the 1998 Vacancies Reform Act provides the chief executive with the, quote, exclusive means to fill the CFPB post. Plaintiffs' arguments to the contrary rest on a bureaucratic sleight of hand effected on the final day of former CFPB Director Richard Cordray's tenure, the DOJ argued, and they noted the agreement of the agency's general counsel, Mary McLeod. It is acting director Mulvaney, who is in residence at the CFPB, is listed as acting director on the CFPB website and has begun work. Indeed, on November 25, the CFPB's general counsel advised all bureau personnel to act consistently with the understanding that Director Mulvaney is the acting director of the CFPB.
In my mind, there's no doubt that Mr. Mulvaney is correctly running the agency, and actually the CFPB's current general counsel agreed. So Ms. English is suing on her own behalf.
With English actively emailing subordinate officials, Mulvaney fired off 2 memos to staff, apologizing for the confusion and disruption, but adding, please disregard any emails sent by or instructions you receive from Ms. English when she is purporting to act as the acting director. And District Court Judge Timothy Kelly, placed on the bench by President Trump, ruled against the request for a temporary restraining order that would have blocked the president's acting director from fulfilling his duties. We also learned in court that Mick Mulvaney, the president's man at CFPB, quote, reprimanded Leandra English. Lou?
James, thank you very much. James Rosen reporting. We're coming right back with much, much more. Stay with us. North Korea firing an ICBM missile for the first time in more than 2 months, and President Trump vowing to take care of the situation.
We have a very serious approach, and nothing changed.
We take it very seriously.
What will it take for the rogue regime to end its provocative actions? We take that up with Fred Fleitz. And a major victory for the president. A federal judge ruling against an Obama leftover engaged in a desperate attack against the president's rightful executive power. We take up the court battle over the rightful leadership of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. What were the Obama holdovers thinking? Stay with us. Breaking news now, the accused mastermind of the Benghazi terror attack cleared of murder charges but convicted of terrorism. The federal jury in Washington, D.C. found Ahmed Abu Khattala to be guilty on only 4 of the 18 counts with which he was charged. That verdict means Khattala will not face the death penalty, instead as much as 45 years in prison. Just hours before Kim Jong-un launched that intercontinental ballistic missile, Hillary Clinton was advising President Trump on how to deal with North Korea, telling him to soften up. Speaking at a conference in Beijing, Clinton actually called for an end to bluster and taunts of North Korea and the little fella to whom the president often refers. This is the same Clinton who failed to rein in North Korea's nuclear ambitions during her 4 years as Secretary of State. Extraordinary, criticizing current policy of the United States in a foreign capital. Well, former President Obama today starting a 5-day trip himself, shadowing President Trump, going to France, to China, to India, where he will meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Obama's trip comes 2 weeks after President Trump met with President Xi in Beijing. Back in May, Obama did the same thing, shadowing President Trump, following him after his first foreign trip to Europe after becoming president. Joining me now, Fred Fleitz, Senior Vice President at the Center for Security Policy, former Chief of Staff to Ambassador John Bolton. And Fred, good to see you. Let's start with North Korea. And North Korea now establishing that they have a delivery system in this ICBM for the first time, today reaching 2,800 miles up into space. They are now armed and fully dangerous to every part of the United States. What's your reaction?
Well, what I was sort of surprised by, Lou, maybe I shouldn't say I was surprised by, how President Trump's critics are trying to say that this development means his policy is failing, his efforts to pressure North Korea is failing. That's not the way I see it. The president inherited an almost impossible situation.
Let's be very straightforward about that because of the way you postured. I don't want there to be any misunderstanding. His critics are scurrilous cowards who failed to do their duty to rein in the Kim family as they kept moving forward with a nuclear ambition.
That's right. He inherited a very difficult problem. He is in the first phase of a rational approach to the threat from North Korea. And I'm with you, Lou. I don't have very high prospects, very high expectations for sanctions. But if sanctions are going to work, they're going to take time. Now, the president
we don't have time. Well, we now have estimates of time for delivery of this system from South Korea and their intelligence of the end of this year. Not next year, not early next year, but by the end of this year, and the pace with which we are watching their ballistic missiles being launched and the performance of those missiles, I personally don't doubt it whatsoever. I can't make a judgment about the miniaturization and the effectiveness of the nuclear warheads that they're obviously developing, but the delivery system seems to be moving apace.
I think that's right. I think sanctions are worth trying. I don't think they're going to work. I think the president is going to transition to a different approach. He's going to have to think about how to ratchet up military pressure against North Korea, possibly shooting down missiles, possibly a military embargo. I think it has to be done carefully, and I think the president's done the right thing to try to get nations in the region behind the United States before he takes that step.
And he's done that, and he's made it very clear, and he has the support of Europe. It even seems from time to time that he has the support of President Xi. It's uncertain, it's vague, and it's not what would be most desirable, and that is an open and concerted effort among Russia, China, and the United States, as well as Europe. But we are no longer in a position where that we're talking about hypotheticals, abstractions. This is a clear and present threat to the security of the United States and, frankly, every country in the world.
I think that's right. I actually think there has been progress with China. Last week, China shut off its main road into North Korea that's used for trade.
Yes.
It cut off flights between Air China and North Korea. These are significant steps. And look, I'm with you. I don't think sanctions are going to work, but we have to go down this road before we begin ratcheting up military pressure.
Well, I would say with only in response to that, depending upon the timetable, the reality of the delivery of potentially the reality of a nuclear warhead on one of those ICBMs against the United States or its allies. Fred, I want to end with one question. I am watching Hillary Clinton now playing shadow to President Trump in Beijing. We are about to watch former President Obama do the same thing, follow just as he did President Trump and on his itinerary in May. Fred, at what point does this president have to pick up a phone and say, we're going to consider it an unfriendly act if you continue to give audience to these folks who are obviously subversive of American interests?
I think you're right. This is just shameful. These people have no class.
This is ignorance beyond belief.
If the Republicans had done this to President Obama, the New York Times would have a front-page headline condemning them. It's just outrageous.
What should he do?
No, I think you're right. I think we should make a statement. He should send a signal to various foreign leaders that this would be considered an unfriendly act. And I think the president has to be more outspoken in this country about these activities by Mr. Obama and by Secretary Clinton.
And how about Leandra English, for crying out loud, and Richard Cardray? Aren't they cute? I mean, they're objectionable in their superciliousness, their absurdity as individuals, and obviously they hold the government in trivial regard. I would love to see the president bring in all of the U.S. Marshals and escort all of these damn fools out of Washington.
This is the swamp, Lou. This is the swamp.
You got it, Fred. Thanks so much.
Good to be here.
Fred Flights. Be sure to vote in tonight's poll. Do you think Chuck and Nancy care how silly and supercilious they look to the American people? Care at all? A whit? Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. We want to hear from you on this one. And follow me on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram at Lou Dobbs. Tonight on Wall Street, another record day for stocks. The Dow looked at the North Korean missile launch, dropped 100 points on the Dow, yawned, and got back to business, which is driving for more records. And mission accomplished. The Dow up to a record high again, up 256 points on the day. The S&P rallying 26 points higher. The NASDAQ up 34. All of those indexes, including, by the way, the Russell 2000 at record heights. Volume on the big board today, 3.4 billion shares. President Trump today touting consumer confidence rising again, levels hitting a 17-year high. Arby's agreeing to buy Buffalo Wild Wings for $2.4 billion, taking the company private. A reminder to listen 3 times a day, coast to coast on the Salem Radio Network to our financial reports. Up next, the House Democrat used $50,000 of good old taxpayer money to pay off a former staffer who threatened to sue. And my gosh, you know, it's also a different fund. It turns out there's more than one secret slush fund in the on Capitol Hill. Wouldn't you know it? Greg Jarrett joins us here next. Stay with us. We really didn't need this. Another example of taxpayers footing the bill for congressional misconduct, even crimes. New reports that Democratic Congressman Raul Grijalva of Arizona negotiated a $50,000 severance package with a top aide who claimed the lawmaker was often drunk and created a hostile workplace. That settlement brokered by the House Employment Council using funds from the congressman's Natural Resources Committee operating budget. Now, doesn't he look like an upstanding fella? I mean, he's got the vest. He's got a sort of a sage look to him. Not the fellow that you would expect to be spending taxpayer money from another fund. But guess what? Joining me now, Fox News legal analyst Greg, Jarrett. Greg, we got a lot to cover, so let's start with Raul Grijalva. We didn't even know about this money, but we're learning more about these people than I ever imagined.
Of course you don't, because it's all done in secret. This is the congressional ploy they set up for themselves.
Well, why the hell hasn't somebody asked Speaker Ryan, how many more of these damn funds do you have? And how much money are you all spending on, misconduct?
Only Congress could create a slush fund for themselves that they use as hush money. That's what it is. And it is high time now that Congress change the law as to themselves. They need to establish new standards, update their code of conduct to the 21st century. It's somewhere in the 1800s, the last time I read it.
What about the lowlifes over at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau? I mean, this stunt by Cordray and Leandra English, who was installed as the new acting deputy director from chief of staff in one day, that is Cordray's last day, and then actually go to a federal court. Why didn't that judge throw them both in jail for being frivolous and actually subversive?
Well, I wouldn't mind that
would be
myself. Yeah. Well, I'm with you on that because, and here's why. Cordray knew what he was doing is illegal. He's a very fine, experienced lawyer. It's abundantly clear under the law.
Fine?
All right. Experienced lawyer. I correct myself. Lou corrects me all the time off camera, just so you know. He knew what he was doing was illegal.
You want to go through the list? Or
It's a long list, folks. How much time do we have? He knew what he was doing was illegal. This was a silly, stupid lawsuit and a stunt she pulled. The law is very clear. We talked about it last night. President has authority. Cordray does not to name his replacement, period.
I love the fact the judge just took this thing on, dismissed it, and I would have actually preferred he somehow bring in the U.S. Marshals to escort them out of court, because the deep state, the left, these Obama holdovers, I mean, they're like, they think they're in a stage play of some kind.
Well, the judge could have done it. There is a code section that if you abuse the court process, you can be held in contempt of court. Bring your toothbrush. You're going to spend the night and maybe a few nights. I would have loved to have seen the judge exercise that federal rule.
Well, that makes it unanimous here. I think we ought to get a hold of the judge, tell him an opportunity missed. But thanks for that decision, because I'm used to this thing taking weeks. This guy decided it straight up. He said he would handle it quickly and did. So, my compliments to the judge.
Sure. Well, a first-year law student would have known the answer to this. I mean, it was a no-brainer.
I'm thinking of all those other cases where it drags out for weeks and months. And first-year law students, whatever they were, didn't quite work it out. Let's turn to the Benghazi suspect. Cleared of murder, but committed terrorism. If you committed terrorism and killed people, as he did, how could you not be found guilty of murder?
The problem
Help me out, counselor.
The problem is 18 U.S.C. 1111. Which is the federal felony murder rule. And it specifies certain felonies, if somebody dies during the course of them, it's automatic murder. It doesn't include terrorism. It's got robbery and extortion and burglary and arson and all kinds. It doesn't have terrorism. It needs to be updated to include that. But look, this was a win for the government and for the American people. Khatallah will spend the rest of his life behind bars. He's looking at 45 years. If the sentences run consecutively, I'm confident they will.
We'll be following you up on that, Counselor.
I know you will.
All right.
Because you'll add it to the list.
We'll add it to the list. Greg Jarrett, thanks for being with us. We're coming right back. Much more straight ahead. Stay with us. President Trump says the tax cut bill is in a very good position after he met with Senate leaders.
The end result would be a very, very massive, the largest in the history of our country, tax cut.
Can the Republicans secure 50 votes to send the bill to conference with the House? We take that up with Ed Rollins. And how could you possibly make water skiing that much more difficult? One way would be to try doing it barefoot while being towed by an airplane. We'll show you the video of the breathtaking stunt here next. Stay with us. We're coming right back. Well, things aren't going the Dems' way, and the list of offenses against decency getting longer. New reports tonight that Congressman Al Green slept with one of his former staffers who said he was, who he said was a drug addict, and then sued her when she threatened to go public, claiming sexual assault, suffering in a hostile work environment. All of that occurred nearly a decade ago, but the congressman and the staffer put out a joint statement today saying they are, quote, consenting friends and regret their former claims. You know, you can just see the things elevating in the swamp, can't you? I mean, it's really a place of just remarkable virtue, a great model for all of America. And a third woman coming forward to accuse Democratic Congressman John Conyers of, yes, sexual harassment. A former staffer of his in his Detroit office says the congressman touched her inappropriately and made unwanted sexual advances toward her. Joining me now, Ed Rollins, Fox Business contributor, chairman of the Great America PAC. You spent a lot of time in politics, in government, and Washington, D.C.
Yes, I have.
This can't get much more sordid, can it?
No, it can't. The problem is there are no rules. You know, to get elected to be a member of Congress, to be a senator, it's like getting your driver's license. You have to be 16 years of age. You have to be 30 years of age to be a senator, 25 years to be a congressman. And then the members are supposed to set their own rules. The Ethics Committee does not function. It's a bipartisan, and it does absolutely nothing. And the reality is the American public has a right to have at least workplace-type rules that you have to...
Well, these people are violating rules of decency,
absolutely,
personal dignity. I mean, what are you? I mean,
and then they're doling out.
If they need rules for that,
well, why
the hell elect them?
Well, you shouldn't elect them, and that's the problem. And the reality is, most laws passed by the lawmakers, there's always a line that goes into almost every bill.
These are scurrilous people.
Except they have an exception for themselves.
But I've just got to interrupt you here. Okay. You've got a speaker and a majority leader in the Senate, a speaker in the House, who are not saying a word. As we watch a federal judge have to knock down an attempt to subvert the government and put in this Leandra English at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I mean, this is outrageous. And there's acquiescence. There's quiet coming from the Republican leadership instead of a show and demonstration of solidarity and unity with the President of the United States.
Well, it's an agency they created, the Congress, and it's an agency that they fund. So they should basically be doing just what you're saying. They won't, though. There's an absolute requirement not to criticize, self-inflicted requirement never to criticize a fellow member. And now they've got a whole bunch of them that are basically out there being publicly exposed because of other things that have been in that society.
They're trying to subvert the President of the United States, Ed.
I understand that.
And that rule...
And it's not going to happen. The President is not going to let it happen. And the court today, we had a judge that acted in the behalf of the laws, the Constitution, does great credit. And I think to a certain extent, lawmakers who make laws ought to basically have to live by those laws.
Let's talk about Chuck and Nancy.
Do we have to?
Yeah, we do, because I mean, they are the most appalling people right now. Withdrawing from a meeting with the President of the United States with a week and a half to go. Within that week and a half, the government could be shut down unless they reach some sort of agreement. And they're behaving like juveniles. They're puerile.
Well, to say that the president insulted him with his tweeter, in which he basically said exactly what they stand for. They did not want an agreement. They wanted to raise taxes. They wanted the DACA. There's nothing insulting in that. He basically was stating the facts. They should have come over and defended themselves if they could. They couldn't. I think this is all drama.
It's all drama, but where are we headed? Tax reform comes out of committee today. We're ready for a vote. Will Mitch McConnell deliver a vote that will send this legislation to conference with the House?
I don't know whether McConnell will. The president delivered a big vote today. He turned Johnson around, who's one of the no votes. And my sense is he's doing everything he can to make this work. If McConnell does not get this thing through, then it's on their fault. It's not. You can't go back and say the president didn't do what he should have done. The president has done everything that he should have done and could have done. And at the end of the day, if there's one or two members that vote against this and don't kill tax reform, they ought to pay a very, very heavy price because the American public wants tax reform.
Well, it was a very good day for the president and a tough day for the deep state and the Dems, particularly Chuck and Nancy.
Yes, absolutely.
Ed, thanks. Ed Rollins.
Thank you.
Please roll the video and watch as a barefoot water skier puts his skills on display in the ultimate test of water skiing in Florida. Look at this. Water skiing barefoot, an incredible one-legged balancing act along with spins and jumps while being pulled along by an airplane. That's pretty impressive, I think. Even if you don't spin or don't jump. We're told reliably he did. There must have been the jump. Up next, a federal judge delivering the Trump administration a victory over an Obama leftover at the CFPB. Former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Tom Dupree joins us to take up the case and more. Stay with us. An Obama-appointed Inspector General now revealing how he was marginalized and threatened when he raised the alarm about former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's private email server. Charles McCullough talked with Fox News' Catherine Herridge about the intense backlash from Clinton allies starting nearly a year before the presidential election.
There was personal blowback. Personal blowback to me, to my family, to my office, the State Department IG, and myself. Would maybe not in that order, I don't know, but we would be the first two to be fired with her administration. That was definitely going to happen.
Joining us tonight, Tom Dupree, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General under President George W. Bush. Tom, good to have you with us.
Good evening, Lou.
This is really remarkable, and it marks the first time I've seen anyone come out of, if you will, out of hiding and actually say something critical of Hillary Clinton while she was Secretary of State, talking about being marginalized and threatened by Clinton allies. What's your reaction to the statements of Charles McCullough?
Well, I'm disappointed, Lou, but I can't say that I'm surprised. I mean, what we've seen and what we've learned about the Clinton, their operations, is that they're not afraid to use these types of strong-arm tactics and say that if you're going to come up and blow the whistle or try to report the truth, that you can expect to pay a political price. So I got to say, I'm not shocked by this, although, again, it is disappointing to hear what's been happening.
And I wanted, so how does this get reconciled? I mean, it's one thing for him to straighten the record out and to make his statements. Is there accountability?
I hope there will be accountability. And look, I think the fact that he's telling the story is putting the media spotlight on this. It's entirely possible that people on the Hill or elsewhere will show an interest in this and try to ferret out what exactly happened, because you can't have situations like this where Inspector General or whistleblowers or other people who are trying to do the right thing are basically chilled from telling the truth because there'll be a political payback if they do so.
And not only are they chilled, we have then even more gross allegations of conduct. We know for a fact that the entire head of the FBI was, quote unquote, marginalized and corrupted because they refused to move forward honestly, straightforwardly with an investigation of Hillary Clinton. Or, excuse me, I think that the head of the FBI was told by the Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, to call it a matter, not an investigation.
That's right. And certainly we've heard a lot of stories about what the Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, was doing behind the scenes to try to tamp down any discussion of what Hillary Clinton had been up to, and really trying to spin things in a way that is very atypical for an Attorney General. I mean, the Justice Department really is the gold standard for independence and integrity. And when you see Attorneys General engaging in these sort of political machinations, I think, frankly, just undercuts the faith of the American public in the impartial administration of justice.
Do you still think the Justice Department is the gold standard after we look at what happened with the FBI, Hillary Clinton, the email scandal, ignoring a pay-for-play, just sinister Clinton Foundation that was obviously working for the Clintons' personal gain as well as against the national interest?
You know, we've heard a lot about the Justice Department in the last 8 years, and obviously not all of it is good, and I'm hopeful that people on the Hill or elsewhere will really start lifting up the hood and looking...
Obstructionism. Charlie Hurt, Mark Simone join me here next. In our online poll, we asked you last night, do you believe any credible collusion investigation, if there is such a thing, should start at the doorsteps of first the FBI and the Obama administration. Nearly 90% of you said yes, good idea. Joining us tonight, Washington Times opinion editor Charlie Hurt. Great to have you here, Charlie. Radio talk show host on New York's WOR, Mark Simone. Great to see you, Mark.
Thanks.
And let's start with you. This is, we get taxes out of a committee. The president is feeling good. He wins with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And this woman that Richard Cordray installed the last few hours is upset that she can't have presidential powers.
Well, you got to give that deep state credit. They try and they'll appoint their own people. And, Steve Bannon may be right. You're not going to drain this swamp. It was 50 years building this thing. It's got infrastructure. You'll never tear this all apart.
Well, I'm not willing to concede that at all. I think this president's doing a pretty good job. And it's slow, and it's not made for people with my particular personal timetable, but it is working. What do you think, Charles?
It's like a zombie bureaucracy, and I agree with you. For the sake of my children, I refuse to believe that it can't be drained. It has to be drained. There has to be some way. But it is. It is like a Walking Dead zombie. You can kill it 1,000 times, and then it's still moving, still lurching in some direction towards preserving itself and building itself back up. I love the thing that Mick Mulvaney said yesterday, that one of his buddies emailed him when he heard of the lawsuit, saying that only in Washington could you get sued for showing up at work.
That's a great line. I missed that.
But he has to be a little more Lou Dobbs-like, and I know he watches this show. He's got to explain this to people.
Sagacious, temperate.
Well, not everybody watches this show. Those that do know what's going on. He's got to explain what's going on here, what this move was by the deep state. President Obama going to Asia. He's got to keep explaining what these moves are.
Isn't that remarkable that that Obama is still doing what he did back in May? He's literally shadowing President Trump on overseas trips. It is stunning to watch it, Charlie.
Yeah, and I don't know if you remember the episode of The Simpsons where they declared Jimmy Carter history's monster.
Whichever edition it was, I missed it.
Okay, well, in it was the town declared Jimmy Carter as history's monster, and they put up a statue to him. And I think they should take that statue down and replace it with Barack Obama, because Barack Obama has now officially become history's monster. When you look at all the problems we have throughout the world, and you look back at the last 8 years, this President Obama, either did nothing to fix any of it or did stuff to make it 10 times worse, and then left it all on President Trump's plate. And the idea that he's going to shadow him around the globe and have all these meetings in all of these corners where he has literally made things so that he's costing people's lives, and who knows how many it's going to wind up being.
And
but
he's
the idea
annoying the hell out of me.
And for 8 years, he's totally disengaged. Now he wants to work.
Yeah, and now suddenly, well, I don't know that he's actually working hard. It's interesting. People forget. He said his greatest fault was, do you remember this? When he came into office, he was asked what his greatest fault was, and he said lazy. It turns out he's worked very hard to upend just about everything that's in the national interest. Extraordinary.
Well, at least if he's trying to some Hillary Clinton scheme, start a foundation, that's why he's meeting with these world leaders. But I think it's not that.
You don't think it's another crooked, rigged deal?
I think it's some deep state something.
Yeah, I can't wait to find out. Charlie Hurt, Mark Simone, thank you both as always.
Thanks, Lou.
That's it for us tonight. Join us here tomorrow. Congressman Ron DeSantis among our guests. We hope you'll be with us. Good night from New York.